Thank you, Adam. So yes, I'm Laia. I'm from Barcelona, and I'm the Chief Science Officer at Ingenii. And as at Ingenii, we are developing quantum solutions for life and environmental sciences. And we're creating this open source library so that every data scientist, without needing to know quantum computing, can use our solutions to solve their own use cases. And we're focusing on short-term, higher impact so that we can all start seeing the benefits of this new technology that has the potential to revolutionize many areas of science and technology. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. Computing, and in particular, an application in healthcare and pharmaceuticals in drug discovery. So I'm going to start by introducing a bit the history of quantum computing, talking about the current challenges, and then we'll jump into the applications that we have developed. So let's start with a brief history of quantum computing. Well, the principles of quantum computing are based on the theory of quantum mechanics, and quantum mechanics was born in 1927 when a group of brilliant scientists, including Albert Einstein, Max Planck, Niels Bohr, gathered in Brussels to talk about physics. And they were discussing about the mysteries of the microscopic world, and they came up with this idea that the energy of the microscopic particles needs to be quantized. This means that it cannot take any continuous value, but rather it has to take discrete values. And this idea is what then would become the theory of quantum information and then quantum computing. But really, the ideas of quantum computing weren't born until the 80s, where Richard Feynman came up with this groundbreaking idea. He said that the universe as a whole is a quantum system. And therefore, if you want to simulate everything that's happening in the universe, you need to use a quantum computer. You cannot do it with a classical computer. And this idea is so important because it means that if we, in fact, build this quantum device, we could solve problems that could never be solved with our classical computers. So then in the 90s, the first quantum algorithms appeared. Maybe the most famous one is Shor's algorithm, which is named after Peter Shor, who was a mastermind in computation. And this algorithm proved exponential advantage over the existing classical algorithm. So it was then when it was shown that quantum algorithms could actually provide a very, very relevant advantage. And then in the late 90s and in the beginning of this century, the first realizations of quantum computers appeared. And since then, there's been a lot of development, both in terms of hardware and also in terms of software and algorithms. So where are we right now? Well, you can see here that research and innovation in quantum technologies is continuously rising. This means that the current investments today exceed the $33 billion, and they are expected to reach the $42 billion by 2027. But that being said, quantum computing is not a race, but it's rather a global ecosystem. Since there are new companies, new startups, a lot of research and investment all over the globe. So now you might be wondering, okay, but how exactly does quantum computing work? Well, let's start with a brief introduction of the fundamentals of quantum computing. So let's start with classical computers. Classical computers are based on binary code. This means that the basic units of information are called bits. They can either be 0 or 1s. However, in quantum computers, the basic units of information are called qubits. And instead of thinking of them as a switch, which can be 0 or 1, you have to think of them as an arrow pointing in any direction in space. If this arrow points up, this represents the 0 state. If it points down, it represents the 1 state. However, one of the cool properties of quantum computing is that this arrow can also be pointing in any other direction in space. And this property is what's called superposition of quantum states. And it's nothing more than the probabilistic mixture of the states 0 and 1. So for example, if you see this qubit here, if we were to measure this qubit in the 0 and 1 basis, we would get 0 80% of the times and 1 20% of the times. And superposition is one of the properties that allows to make these powerful quantum algorithms. Then there's another property which is maybe even more important, which is called entanglement. And entanglement refers to the fact that qubits are not independent from each other, but rather they are part of a larger quantum system. This means that if you make an operation, if you change one of the states of the qubits, this can automatically have an effect in another qubit which is entangled to the first one. Therefore, these qubits can transmit information faster than the speed of light. And this is why Einstein referred to this fact as spooky action at distance. And entanglement and superposition are the two properties that make quantum algorithms so powerful. But that being said, there's a disclaimer, which is that quantum computing is not the next iteration of supercomputing, which would accelerate any computational task, but rather it's a different way of designing algorithms that can speed up the computation of certain problems. So quantum computing can be very useful to solve certain problems, but it's not necessarily the next iteration of classical computing. So let's talk about the challenges in quantum computing. Well, the first one is that to generate powerful algorithms, you need a lot of qubits. This is the same with classical qubits. If you want to have a powerful classical computer, you're going to need a lot of bits. Well, the same happens with quantum computers. So here you can see the roadmap of IBM, which is one of the largest quantum computing providers. And you can see that year after year, they release a new device. And this device has at least twice as many qubits as the previous ones. This means that the development of quantum hardware is increasing exponentially. And actually, it just released the 2023 quantum device, which has over 1,000 qubits. And I would say that maybe the most important thing of this roadmap are those green ticks that you see here. This means that so far, all the deadlines have been met. And this also gives us confidence to expect that the deadlines will be met in the future as well. So this is one of the challenges, but as you can see, the progress is very positive. Then there's another challenge in quantum computing, which is the quality of these qubits. So in order to create these powerful algorithms, you not only need a lot of qubits, but you also need to maintain the quality of these qubits. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're building a quantum computing, the problem is that the qubits are not completely isolated, so they interact with the environment. And when they interact with the environment, they usually lose information to this environment. And this, at the end of the day, means that the accuracy of your algorithms decreases, so that you cannot make sure that your algorithms will be 100% accurate. So this is why it's important to try to correct those errors as they happen and maintain the high quality of the qubits. So here you can see a graph by McKinsey where they separate the quantum development era into two phases. The first one is the pre-fault tolerant era, which is where we are right now. And this refers to the fact that qubits are still not 100% error corrected, so there are still errors in the qubits. And then when we reach this fault tolerant era, all the qubits would be error corrected, and this would unlock a large space of quantum algorithms. And regarding timelines, most hardware providers expect to reach this fault-tolerant era by 2030, so it's really not that far away. And also the fact that we're not there yet doesn't mean that we can't still develop useful solutions. We can start by develop hybrid solutions, which are part classical and part quantum. We can also develop quantum-inspired solutions that mean that they run on classical hardware, but they are inspired by the ways quantum information and quantum computing works. And then you can also design smaller scale quantum solutions that will scale as the hardware improves. So basically, we have these current computers which are not perfect, and we want to build all these cool applications with them. However, there's a problem, which is noise, which is this interference with the environment. So how do we solve this? Well, there are basically two techniques. The first one is error correction. Error correction refers to the fact that you can correct the errors in real time, so as they happen. And the way to do this is by adding certain qubits that would measure if there has been an error in your quantum circuit, and if so, you would try to correct it. And this is what is supposed to take us to this fault-tolerant era. The only problem is that creating these codes is hard. You need a lot of qubits, so there's a bit of an overhead there. But there's a lot of progress in this field. And then another technique is error mitigation. Error mitigations consist on running your algorithm in the noisy quantum computer, then retrieving the output, and then trying to mitigate the effect of noise after you have run the algorithm. This means that you try to understand the physical processes that are happening within the quantum device, and then you try to reduce the bias in the outputs of your computation. So the good thing about this technique is that you can apply it today. You don't need extra qubits. You don't need extra new devices. The only problem is that it will not correct 100% of the errors. So the idea is that by combining these two techniques and scaling and improving the quantum hardware, we're getting closer and closer to this fault-tolerant era, and we are developing useful solutions in the way. So this was the introduction, and now I wanted to present one of the applications that we developed at Ingenii, which consists of using quantum machine learning, so the fusion of quantum computing and also AI, machine learning, for solving a drug discovery problem. So luckily, healthcare and pharmaceuticals is one of the areas where quantum computing is expected to have the highest impact, and this is why there are a lot of applications within this space. So the one that I wanted to talk about today is based on quantum neural networks. Well, quantum neural networks are machine learning models that combine the concepts of quantum computing and also artificial neural networks. So let's start with a classical neural network. Here you can see a picture of the standard feed-forward network. You can see that it consists of a matrix of interconnected neurons that would work together to perform a certain task. And each of the neurons that you see here have hidden weights and biases that need to be learned during the training phase. Also, there are three types of layers in this network. The first one is the input layer that would map your data into the network. Then you have the hidden layers that will try to extract useful information from this input data. And finally, you have the output layer that would produce the predictions of your network. So this is the idea, the simple idea of a classical neural network. And now if you go to quantum neural networks, well, the ideas are very similar. The structure is very similar. So we have also three types of layers. The first one is the data encoding. This means that it would take your classical data and map it into a quantum system, in this case, a quantum circuit. Then you would have a variational model that would perform quantum operations, and that would have hidden parameters that need to be learned during the training phase. Finally, you would apply some measurements to this quantum circuit, which would retrieve the classical information and provide the predictions of your quantum neural network. And when you want to train this neural network, you would do it in a similar way as the classical neural network. So once you have the predictions, you would compute the loss function, and then through classical parameter optimization, you would change the parameters of this variational model. So now you might be wondering, okay, but why should I use a quantum neural network instead of a classical neural network? Well, there are some advantages of using quantum neural networks. The first one is the high dimensional space of the input data. This is because the size of the data that you can encode in a quantum circuit scales exponentially with the number of qubits. So if you have n qubits, you would be able to encode data samples of size 2 to the power of n. This means that this exponential scaling really allows you to work with higher dimensional data. And then there's a second advantage, which is very related to this, which is the lower complexity of these neural networks. Usually with classical neural networks, if you really want to build a very powerful model, you're going to end up with a huge neural network with millions or billions of training parameters. And therefore, to train this neural network, you're going to need huge data sets and long training times. However, with quantum neural networks, since you're using fewer qubits or fewer computational resources, your variational model will usually also have fewer training parameters. This means that there are less parameters to train, and usually you can train this with shorter training times and smaller data sets. And finally, there's a third advantage, which is relevant in certain applications. And this is that you are performing operations in the quantum space instead of the classical space. And this can improve the performance for certain tasks. This is particularly interesting when you're working with quantum data. And quantum data, I mean data that is related to any quantum mechanical process, such as, for example, the simulation of molecules. So these are quantum neural networks. And now let's talk about the particular application. So the goal of this project was to, at the end of the day, cut expenses and durations of the early stages of drug discovery. So we were focusing on the early stages of target discovery and target validation. So once a molecule has been suggested, has been proposed, before going to clinical trials, you have to perform a computational analysis to validate this drug before testing it with actual people. So basically, if we can accelerate this process, this would mean that the people will end up receiving the treatment faster, which is the end goal. There are a lot of things that we could do in this space, and we focus on predicting the binding affinity, which measures the strength of the binding interaction between a single drug that is proposed and the target protein. This is very important because you want to design drugs that bind their target selectively, so that they bind a specific protein and do not bind others, because this could produce side effects. And it's not straightforward to calculate these binding affinities because there are a lot of factors that can change the strength of this interaction. So currently, one of the the state-of-the-art methods to calculate these binding affinities are based on classical neural networks, and one of the neural networks that is pretty much used is the convolutional neural network. So this neural network provides very high accuracy, but as I said, it has many training parameters, and therefore you need larger data sets and long training times. So the first step of this project was to propose a hybrid architecture, which is half classical and half quantum. And the way to do that would be replacing the first layer of the convolutional neural network, so the first convolutional layers, by quantum layers. And by doing so, what we achieve is we reduce the number of training parameters from 10 million to 8 million. And then, since we have to learn less parameters, we also reduce the training times from 18 to 10 days. And we also saw that there was lower generalization error. This means that the neural network tended to overfit less the training data. So all in all, we achieved a 20% reduction in training parameters and a 20 to 40% savings in training times and cost derived from GPUs. And this variation depended on the hardware where you were training these neural networks. So this is one of the examples where you can use quantum neural networks. In this case, it's hybrid because of the requirements of the hardware and the current state of quantum computing, but you could scale this to transform the network to be more quantum. And finally, the last step of this project was to try to improve the accuracy. And to do that, we took two different state-of-the-art classical machine learning models. One was the convolutional neural network, and the other one was a graph neural network. These two models look at the data in different ways, so they provide complementary information from the data. And what we did is we took the extracted information and passed it through a quantum neural network that would fuse the information from these two networks and provide a final prediction. And with this quantum neural network, we compared it with classical models, and we achieved a 5% improvement compared to the classical neural network, and also better conversions than the classical fusion models. This means that, again, the network would overfit less the training data and therefore have better generalization capacities. So all in all, with this project, we combined a hybrid 3D convolutional neural network and a quantum fusion model to predict the binding affinities between potential drugs and target proteins. And with that, we were able to cut expenses and duration of the training of these models, and also improve a little bit the accuracy of the final model. And I actually think that the best thing about this is that it can be extended to other use cases. So this is not particular to this binding affinity or even drug discovery, but it can be extended to other problems that involve neural networks. So some of the areas that we are exploring right now is predicting many-to-many interactions. So instead of focusing only on one drug and one protein, we would focus on one drug and many proteins, for example. This can also be relevant for medical imaging diagnostics, because when you work with medical images, you usually work with very high dimensional tensors or high dimensional images, and it's hard to automatize diagnostics with that. And also resource management within drug discovery, because there's a lot of drugs that are being gone to waste during the clinical trial selection. So these are some of the use cases that we are exploring at Ingenii. And this is the end of my talk. I just wanted to end with the conclusions. So basically, if you have to remember anything about this talk, would be that quantum computers work in fundamentally different ways as classical computers. They are not the next iteration of classical computers, and they enable significant speed up for certain computational problems. And even though there are still challenges in quantum computers, such as achieving a large number of qubits and very high quality of these qubits as well, there's also an exponential development of this technology that give us hope that we will have rapidly a working quantum computer that can solve many different problems. And there are many applications in quantum computing in healthcare and pharmaceuticals, such as drug discovery, diagnostic assistance, and also precision medicine. So thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for being here. And if you have any questions,